I am Alice, a sales executive at an e-commerce company in Winona. I'm 33 years old and have a happy family consisting of my husband Scott, my son Oliver, and my mother-in-law Ruth. I've had a happy childhood in Philadelphia. However, I married young at 18 while I was still in college pursuing a diploma in business management. My parents, who doted on me, were against it because they were concerned about me and my future. But I was too much in love to think about the repercussions. My boyfriend seemed perfect, and we had also rented out a place to live and used to work multiple odd jobs to make ends meet since our families had cut us off. We soon welcomed our first child when I was 19. Initially, everything was rosy and we were managing our parental duties well. But soon after my son Oliver's birth, everything changed. My husband's father died in a car crash. His mother suffered from a neurological breakdown due to shock, ultimately resulting in her getting diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The fact that he wasn't allowed to meet them disturbed my husband to the core. I stuck by his side until he ultimately left his job and fooled around without caring about his wife or son. He got into gambling and got abusive. I walked out of the marriage when he hit our 5-year-old son. I started building our lives from scratch and landed up at my present job. However, I decided to take a break from all romantic endeavours for a couple of months to get to know myself. No dating and no distractions. I wanted to move on in a healthy way for my son. After a year, my best friend invited me to join her and her fiancé for dinner.
May I sit here?
I looked up to find a handsome man looking at me, asking if he could sit next to me in the restaurant. His warm, hazel eyes emitted a loving gaze I hadn't seen for years. It was Scott. Yes, please, I smiled. We met again shortly thereafter at her wedding, but we barely spoke. At the end of the evening, though, he came up to me and said,
Alice?
Oh, hi.
I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you look stunning in that gown.
I shyly thanked him and asked if he would like to take a walk after the wedding. During that walk, we talked about our career goals, hobbies, and families. There was no going back after that. We eventually started dating and got married. He's been an equally affectionate father. Every year on Oliver's birthday we visit a new city. Scott has literally been the only father Oliver has ever known. Even my mother-in-law Ruth loved Oliver. But things changed after I got pregnant. One day while waiting at the billing counter at Walmart, I overheard her talking to the cashier.
Please check once again if any fruit is not rotten. My daughter-in-law is pregnant, and I do not want her to get sick. Oh, congratulations! Will this be your first grandchild? Well, it'll be my first real grandchild. I have a step-grandson who's 10 because my son married my daughter-in-law when he was 5, but I tried to treat him the same. With all the pretense she could muster, her obnoxious gushing out about her real grandchild was intercepted with a faint smile by the cashier, who chose to keep things professional rather than commenting. But that day, I realized she never loved my child with her whole heart. My mother-in-law also had a granddaughter from my sister-in-law, and she had adored her ever since she was born. She cares for her a lot, pampers her with gifts, and tries to spend most of her time with her granddaughter whenever she visits. Anyone who saw my mother-in-law with her would probably think that she is the best grandmother one could ever have. Well, she probably is, but only for her daughter's daughter. Are you out of your mind? No way I'm letting you do this. I woke up to the cacophony of the mother-son duo arguing one morning. Mom, please. Oliver is my son, and I want to bring him up in the best way. I don't need any more children.
She was absolutely furious to hear that Scott did not want to have a biological child and was mad at both of us. Scott and I had talked about this a night earlier, and I had strongly advised him against doing this.
But what about me? What about the family lineage? Oliver is your grandchild, and he will further our family. I'm not listening to this erratic decision. If you decide not to have kids, I will end my life. You are just being ridiculous. All right, I promise we won't do that. Tell me, did she brainwash you into this? What? No, Mum. She told me that you will be upset about this and I shouldn't talk about this. This is solely my decision. I did not want a strained relationship with my mother-in-law. She had been extremely accommodating earlier, and I didn't know what had caused the differential treatment, but I was certain we would win her over again with our love. I didn't know that was my biggest misconception. We were at a farmhouse for my mother-in-law's birthday, and we were having apples. She had already eaten 2 apples, but wanted more. Scott refused. Then Oliver whispered into her ear playfully, "Don't worry, Grandma. I will sneak an apple for you upstairs." Scott then commented, "What's going on over there?" However, my mother-in-law was not very amused and said in a stern, accusatory voice, "Oliver, it is not good to ever sneak her any food because of choking. You should not learn to pick food without asking an elder." I stepped in to say that what you are saying is true, but he knows it is not appropriate. He was just joking around with you. "Yes, I am her apple dealer." We laughed, but she retorted, "It's even worse that he is trying to be my favourite. He shouldn't learn favouritism either." I was heartbroken to see my baby's face fall. All he was doing was trying to bond with his grandmother, who once loved him dearly. My husband could not take it. "Mum, you know how much he loves you, right? He would never do anything to hurt you." "Yeah, I'm sure you love him very much." I was cuddling with Oliver one day when she saw it and exclaimed, "Alice, what are you doing? You are pregnant and you are crushing your belly. It is not good for the baby. Don't do that before your delivery." Am I not even allowed to love my son? I wondered how rational that was, but I silently complied because I did not want any drama. Hell broke loose one day. It was Oliver's 12th birthday and Scott wanted to host a big party. We had invited many relatives, colleagues and family friends. All of Oliver's friends were also there. We were preparing to cut his cake when suddenly my sister-in-law's daughter came crying up to my mother-in-law, who was standing beside me. She claimed that Oliver had hit her and pushed her to the ground. Her anger knew no bounds. I could sense she was losing her sanity. Before I could try to calm her down, she went up to Oliver and, without asking either child what it was about, slapped him. "You have gathered a lot of guts, haven't you? Creating a scene on your birthday? Get out of the house!" Oliver flinched at the impact of the slap and fled from the house crying. I went behind him. After some time, I came back and had to shout at her, "What are you doing? It's his birthday today. At least hear what he had to say. Stop siding with your son. I've been neglecting the fact that he forgets where he has come from. I have tolerated him enough." "Mum, do you even know what the fight was about? They had an argument about you, and she told Oliver you are not even her real grandson and continued to mock him, after which Oliver pushed her to the ground. She glared at me when I said, I absolutely do not condone his behaviour for any reason, but I wonder where she learnt this from. My mother-in-law was speechless for a moment. It was then that we finally found out the reason behind her selective behaviour towards her grandchildren. It is pretty normal for me to not have affectionate feelings for him because he was born by an outsider and not my son. No matter what, the children of my biological children will always be more dear to me than your son. She turned away and continued, I'm going to love your baby more. This is completely reasonable, and that is how most grandmothers feel. They just don't say it. I couldn't believe my ears when she spilled her secret. It was like a bolt from the blue, leaving me utterly flabbergasted. I mean, seriously, where on earth did she pick up this old-school notion? Who was the sneaky influencer behind it all? And how in the world did she end up thinking like this? Her whole rationale had us all dumbfounded and at a loss for words. Oliver also told me how his grandma used to tell his sister before him that his brother, sister,
would be Mummy and Daddy's real child. I asked him what else did Grandma tell him, and he told me about how she had been telling him that she wasn't really his sister. I saw my mother-in-law look away with a hint of guilt. Now he thinks that he is extra special to his parents because they do not want him to realise it. How his little brother or sister always going to be Grandma's favourite grandchild, and so much more. What have you been feeding into his mind? I didn't lie about anything. It is the truth, and he must realise it. Unfortunately, Scott was away for a business trip when this happened. The next day, I told him everything.
I'm not surprised at all. She's always been quite cold towards him, sometimes acting as if he doesn't exist. I remember sometimes he never received even a simple happy birthday from his grandmother, let alone gifts. She never shows any interest in his life, never asks how he's doing at school or about his friends.
Scott then tried to talk to her.
What you have done is too much, Mum. I have accepted and am bringing up Oliver as my own child, so what difference does it make? It makes a lot of difference, Scott, and it matters to me. And don't you even think of judging me. You can't force me to love your son. That's never going to happen. I don't feel him as my grandchild, and you'll have to get over it. But Scott was unyielding. No, Mum. It's you who'll have to get over not seeing us anymore. We don't need this kind of toxicity in our lives, and we definitely don't want our child to experience it. I want you to leave my house this instant. Shock and betrayal rushed through her face. She gaped at her son. Though I didn't want my husband to live away from his mother or to shun her this way, I thought it was for the good. It's not like we need her. We don't. We could be perfectly good on our own. Being a grandmother to a child who loved her so much is a privilege, and she tossed it away by her own choice. Too bad for her. As much as it upsets us, we had to take this decision. However, she won't give up. That's not fair! You can't leave your elderly mother on the streets! I can sue you! Do whatever you want. You cannot see your grandkids from now on. You will be a bad influence on them anyway. Since she said that, I low-key hope that when she gets older, she doesn't try to crawl back to us asking for help because our doors will be closed for her. If that's how you have truly felt about me and my son, then you should not be a part of my children's lives. I will disown you legally and make sure you are not able to fill their minds with poison anymore. He packed her stuff, after which she went to stay at their native in Florida. In the meanwhile, she kept threatening us over call and asserting her rights over the house and over her grandchildren. She even bad-mouthed about me to her relatives and how I had separated her from her son. Blinded with rage, Scott and I blocked her on everything after sending her a text detailing her actions that we heard from Oliver and his granddaughter, how it was absolutely unacceptable, and how she'd never be seeing her grandkids until they're much older and understand the world around them so they wouldn't be swayed by her words. We didn't hear from her for a long time after that. One day, we got an anonymous call saying my mother-in-law was admitted into a hospital after she broke her pelvis in the bathroom, and there were chances she would never be able to walk again. Scott got frantic on hearing this and rushed to be by her side. No matter how good a father Scott was, he was a son too. Though he was mad at his mother for doing what she did, he could not hide the fact that he loved her. Honey, I think stopping her from seeing the kids is inhumane now. She's old and infirm and would want to be with her family in these difficult times. She's just a bit conventional. Scott got a little emotional. I met her in the hospital, and she told me how being alone and on the hospital bed made her realize how unpredictable life is, and that she didn't know that karma of her deeds would hit her in this way. I think we should bring her back home. He held my hand and looked into my eyes. I do not have the heart to leave her alone at this time, and I cannot keep going back and forth to Florida that often. I hope you understand. Of course, honey. It pains me too to see her in this way. No matter what, she is your mother, and you should tend to her right now. It's going to be a bit difficult with Oliver, but I'll ensure they get along well now. I believe she has realized that she was wrong. A few days later, she got discharged from the hospital and we brought her home. Things were going smooth, and I thought we finally got back together as a happy family. One day, Oliver was playing around the house when he accidentally slipped
and hurt his elbow. We were unexpectedly visited by officials from the Social Services Department a few days later. They said that they had received a complaint that my husband and I neglected our kid because we were excitedly awaiting the arrival of our own baby. Their claims got substantiated when they saw the injury mark on Oliver's elbow and assumed we might have physically abused him. They attempted to forcefully take him away. I was scared and tried my best to convince them against it, but they wouldn't pay heed. They took my baby away. I was inconsolable. Scott said, "I wonder who might have given them this false information." My mother-in-law suggested we visit the office and personally convince them to let us keep Oliver. After a lot of hue and cry, we were finally able to get him back and prove that they might have received a malicious call. But as we prepared to take Oliver back, he softly mumbled to me, "Don't leave me with Dad, Mama, I'm scared of him." This came as a surprise to me since he had never said that before. Scott was shocked too. He tried to hug Oliver, but he retreated. One day after finding him alone, I managed to talk to him about the day. "Oliver loves his mama, doesn't he?" "Yes, Mama. And he never lies to me. So will he answer what I ask honestly?" He nodded. "Why are you scared of Daddy, honey? Did he say something?" "No, but Grandma said once the baby is here, he will throw me out of the house." Such spite! We gave her another chance to have a happy family and she totally blew it. I realized she could never accept us. By now, I also got an idea about who might have reached out to the Social Service Department regarding the fake complaints. But I decided not to confront her at once and talk to Scott first. However, God gave me a sign. Ever since her accident, my mother-in-law had been on a wheelchair, and she used to work on that wheelchair itself. That evening she was preparing coffee when she accidentally spilled hot water on her leg. "Holy Mother of God, help!" she screamed on the top of her lungs as she sprang from her wheelchair and rushed to the kitchen to get some ice. Coincidentally, Scott also returned from office. I came out of my room and both of us were appalled to see that she had been faking her injury to get her way back into the house. "Mum, you can walk!" She froze and slowly turned around to see us. Oh, the impact of hot water was such that I could finally walk! Oh, what a miracle! I guess no one had told her that she could not fake herself at all. "This is sick, Mum. How could you stoop so low? I have idolized you since childhood, and this is how you have turned out to be just because you despise a little child so much!" I had never seen Scott so angry and sad at the same time. "I trusted you and my heart yearned to take care of you when I heard about the mishap that happened with you. This is how you pay me back. Get out of my house now!" "Honey, please hear me out. I did all of this because I want to make you realize that we can be a happy family, even without that child. Your child needs a grandparent. Don't deprive her of this happiness. What will you say once he grows up and gets to know that he has a grandmother you choose to hide from him? I will take care of it. I'm sure when he or she is old enough to decipher your wrongdoings, he will automatically understand that you could have done no good by being around them." He went to pack her stuff and came back with her luggage. "You can't be a good mother. How can your mind convince you to do and say all that to a young child and going to the extent of brainwashing him?" We never saw his mother after that. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl a few months later. Scott loved both his children equally and taught them to always stand by the truth. I, on the other hand, used to reflect on how I have seen mothers. My mother was a modern and progressive woman despite being from the countryside. We rarely talked about marriage and kids. She pushed me to fulfill my career goals. Unfortunately, I didn't value her ideas back then since I wanted to get married so badly. But life shows you the mirror eventually. I learnt from my mistakes and the people I met. Scott and Ruth are from the same family but different generations. While I cannot entirely blame her for having such notions, I think if she would have really loved Scott, she would have found happiness in his happiness. Her comments about and to my son had been unreasonable and unfair. Luckily, Oliver hasn't grown up to hate and disrespect her, but he always remembered her as his grandmother. I cannot even begin to imagine what would have happened had she stayed with us for more time and continued to play her dirty games. Fortunately, fate took a toll on her, and we were free of her toxicity and drama once and forever.